Hello, I'm Mary Pederson, the Forestry Technician with the City of Lakeville. I'm out here at Dodd Trail Park, and today I'm going to go over some of my tips and tricks for helping you plant trees in your yard. When picking out your tree, it's important to think about what tree will do best in which site. So that will involve doing a bit of research, but people at your local nursery should have a lot of good recommendations in terms of helping you find what will work best for you. For a shade tree, so a tree that you want to get nice and big, I'm looking for things like good structure. So it has one central leader, so that's just one straight stem all the way to the top, and then a couple good side branches like this one. Other things I'm looking for on the tree is how healthy the tree looks with its foliage, whether or not there's any dead, damaged, or broken branches. There's a little broken branch right here, but that's something that I can prune off. I'll also be looking along the stem of the trunk to see whether or not there's any stem wounds. Things like that would mean that I wouldn't want to choose this tree for my yard. So the other part of the tree that I'm looking at besides the canopy is going to be the root system. So on a tree in the nursery, I'm going to be looking for the root flare or the first woody root. So sometimes at nurseries, topsoil gets added on top of the first woody root. So that does mean that you do have to dig down until you see or feel for that first woody root. On this tree, the first woody root is right here. It's good to see that at the soil surface. Other things I'm looking for are girdling or circling roots, which unfortunately this tree has, where there's a tree that's going and starting to wrap around the trunk. We want to avoid trees like this because unless these roots are pruned off, they end up girdling and choking out the tree as it gets larger. So this isn't ideal, but I'll be able to prune this off before planting, and that will avoid the issue in the future. At least 2 days before I start to dig the hole, I'm going to go for state one call to have underground utilities marked so that I stay safe while digging my hole. In terms of the depth that you want to dig the hole is you're looking for that first woody root, and I just use my shovel to measure that distance. And then based on the size of my hole, I want my fingers or the top of that root to be within 1 inch of ground level, usually a little higher. In terms of the width of the hole should be 1.5 to 2 times the width of your container or root ball. So I'll use my shovel again to measure my width. And it looks like it's about 1.5. So that will work for us. So typically at a nursery, you'll see trees and plants in a pot like this, just black, no holes. This is kind of a special pot because it has holes along the side. It's called an air prune pot. So typically in your normal container, the root systems, once they reach the edge of the container, will start growing along the edge and circling around. These holes in the pot prevent the tree roots from circling, which is what we want. So when pruning off my girdling, circling roots, I'm going to avoid damaging my stem, or try to avoid damaging my stem, and try to make clean cuts. So if your tree does have any dead, damaged, or broken branches, now is a really nice time to prune it versus once it's in the ground. So right now, it's easy to just prune off my damaged branch, and especially if your tree is tall, it's easy to just tip your tree over, and then you can easily reach broken or damaged branches off at the top rather than having to get a stepladder out once the tree is planted. Now, my tree is pruned, ready to take it out of the pot. So, typically on a container tree, we would be seeing a lot more roots that would be growing in circles around the edge of the pot. Since it's an air prune pot, we don't have that. So if there aren't a lot, you'd want to ruffle the edges, break up the root systems, so that way the roots stop growing in a circle and they can start growing outwards into the surrounding soil. If you have a lot of circling roots, you're going to want to take a pruner's or a saw and cut an inch or an inch and a half off the edge of every side of your root system to get rid of those girdling and circling roots. When I'm planting my tree, I'm also looking at the shape and size of my tree. I like to put the side that I think is kind of most aesthetically pleasing in a certain direction, or the side that I'm going to see most. So we have a trail right here, and I really like this side of the tree because we have some nice lateral branches that are going to grow this way. So I'm going to make sure when I put my tree in the hole, I have it rotated so that the side I want is facing the direction I want. So at this point, I'm also going to make sure the bottom part of my trunk is going to be straight up and down in the hole. So that might mean adjusting a little, adding a little soil on the edges of the hole to make sure that my trunk will be straight up and down and not leaning too much one way or another. It is also helpful to take a step back on all sides of the tree just so it looks straight up and down 360. I do want to avoid adding any roots that might have been in the soil or really large rocks back into the hole. So as I'm backfilling soil into the hole, I do want to be pressing some of the soil down. All I really have to use is my hand, or I can also use my foot to just apply a little bit of pressure to make sure that the soil is a little compact. Don't need to be using any tools or anything, still need to be a little loose so that the root systems want to grow into it. So at this point I have most of my soil backfilled. I'm just going to step where I added soil to pack it down a little bit to see if I need to add any more. So this would be a good point if you wanted to add a little bit of black compost around your planting hole. So 1 or 2 inches, pull it a little way away from the trunk or root flare, but then just cover your soil. The tree will appreciate the nutrients and organic matter. Okay, so our next step is going to be adding mulch to the base of the tree. Doesn't have to be anything fancy. It can just be regular wood or bark mulch. It's really good to be mulching around the tree because it adds organic matter and nutrients to the tree and helps retain water moisture in the soil so that way the root system doesn't dry out. So I like to have 3 to 4 inches of mulch around the base of my trunk. And another key part is you should be able to see the first woody root flare on your trunk. So it should be that 3 to 4 inches thick around the edge, but you don't want the mulch piled around the trunk. So once we have our tree planted, I'm ready to water my tree in. I'm going to be using a couple gallons of regular water from a hose or faucet and whatnot, just to get the roots moist and ready to grow. And it's easy enough if you're at home to just use a hose and have it turned onto a slow trickle just around the base of your tree. Those are my tips and tricks for planting trees. I'll see you next time. Remember to water your trees.